There we go.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Mount Vernon SSPA Task Force. It's Tuesday, May 10th, 2020. I am Walter Clark, co-chair, along with co-chair Mr. Tim Sargent, and we will begin the meeting. But before we do so, to conduct this meeting wholly electronically and to effectuate both the emergency procedures authorized by FOIA and emergency ordinance, the Mount Vernon District SSPA Task Force must make certain findings and determinations for the record. It's a bit cumbersome, so I ask in advance for your patience. So first, because each member of the task force is participating in this meeting from a separate location, we must first verify that a quorum of members participating and each member's voice is clear, audible, and at an appropriate volume for all of the other members. Accordingly, I am going to conduct a roll call and ask that each task force member participating in this meeting to state your name and location from which you are participating. I ask that each member pay close attention to ensure that you can hear each of your colleagues. Following the roll call, we will vote to establish that every member can hear every other member. Mr. Tim Sargent.
Tim Sargent, present at his home in the Mount Vernon district.
Catherine Ward.
Present at my home in the Mount Vernon district, Gladstone Place.
Lynn Pasco. Lynn, you're on mute.
Stop eating your cookie.
Lynn must be on mute.
I was being a good boy and muting. I'm sorry. I'm here from my home in Montebello.
All right, very good. Gretchen Waltz.
Here at my home on New Market Road in Mount Vernon district.
Tracy Wood. Queenie Cox not here tonight. Mary Payton.
Here at my home in Mount Vernon district.
Holly Doherty.
Hi, Walter. I'm here. I'm at home.
Hello, Holly. Hamid Munir. Hillary Clausen.
I'm here. I'm at my home in Mason Neck.
David Levine.
This is David, and I'm calling from my home in Alexandria.
Evan Kaufman.
I'm here calling in from Richmond, Virginia.
Ellen Young.
I'm here in Bellevue in the Mount Vernon district.
Very good. And Walter Clark, I am calling from Alexandria, Virginia, the city of Alexandria. At this point, I will pass the gavel to our co-chairman, Mr. Tim Sargent, so that I may be heard to make the requisite motion. I move that each member's voice may be adequately heard by each other member and the Mount Vernon District SSPA Task Force. It is so moved.
Do we hear a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Anyone opposed, say nay. Hearing none, the motion passes.
Thank you. Second, having established that each member's voice may be heard by every other member, we must next establish the nature for the emergency that compels these emergency procedures. The fact that we are meeting electronically, what type of electronic communication is being used, and how we are arranged for the public access to this meeting. Therefore, I move that the state of emergency caused by the COVID-19 pandemic makes it unsafe for the task force to physically assemble and unsafe for the public to physically attend any such meeting, and that such the FOIA's usual procedures, which require the physical assembly and the task force and the physical presence of the public, cannot be implemented safely or practically. I further move that the task force may conduct this meeting electronically through the dedicated video and audio conferencing line, and that the public may access this meeting by registering through the meeting link on the Track a Plan Amendment page of the SSPA website at www.fairfaxcounty.gov/planning-development/SSPA/south/track-plan-amendment, or by calling 1-844-621-3956 TTY 711 and entering access code. It is so moved.
Do I hear a second? Can I get a second?
I'll second.
I'm sorry, who seconded first?
Lynn.
Lynn, thank you, Lynn. Okay, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Anyone opposed, say nay. Hearing no opposition, the motion has passed.
Thank you. Finally, it is next required that all of the matters addressed on today's agenda must address the emergency itself, are necessary for continuity in the Fairfax County government, and are statutorily required or necessary to continue operations and discharge of the Mount Vernon District SSPA Task Force's lawful purposes, duties, and responsibilities. It is so moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second, Gretchen.
Gretchen, thank you, Gretchen. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Hearing no opposition, the motion passes.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Sergeant. So, since our last meeting, which has been a little bit of time, are there any public comments or emails received that we need to address before we get started with tonight's presentation?
No comments received.
Okay, thank you very much. So tonight we will hear regarding the Huntington Metro Station. And before we get started on that presentation, as Graham, are there any additional or house cleaning notices that we need to take up at this time?
Thank you, Commissioner Clark. Good evening, everybody. Good to see you all again. It has been a little while since we met last, so it's good to see everyone's faces. We have just one housekeeping item which we can deal with at the very end. We're going to have a robust discussion about transportation impacts with the Huntington Metro Station. Go over two in particular planning efforts that have been underway related to the active transportation elements that relate to the site and its surroundings. That's going to be led by Tim Cutts with FCDOT. And then we're also going to be having a discussion of the transportation impact analysis, the vehicular study that's been underway over the past couple of months. And so that's been an effort that's been led by Kimberly Horn, who is with WMATA and Stout and Teague, who are the original nominators. And Bob Pecora with FCDOT will be giving a presentation summarizing that study and the mitigations that are associated with the Huntington Metro Station. So those will be kind of the main focuses of the evening, presentations as well as Q&A and discussion on those. I'll have one kind of brief housekeeping item at the end to give the task force a sense of, now that we've concluded, kind of the topic areas. Where do we see the next couple of meetings going in terms of going into the next phase with the task force, which is looking at potential draft plan text. So it'll just be a kind of a brief thing. We can reserve it at the end, but I want to make sure that everybody has a sense of what to expect. So with that, Commissioner Clark and Commissioner Sargent, I can just turn it over to Tim and to Bob if you guys are ready to go, unless you have any questions.
Yes, sir. I think that would be great. Thank you.
Okay.
Sounds good.
All right. Bob, Tim, take it away.
Okay, thank you, Graham. Welcome everyone to our transportation presentation. I'm going to share a screen and I will talk about, well, you heard from Graham what we're going to be presenting about, so we'll get that started and then we'll get going. We have quite a bit to discuss with you today, so we will. Okay, everyone should hopefully be seeing my screen. So yeah, active transportation study, transportation analysis, and transit parking demand. So that's the park and ride demand study. So Tim is going to start us off. Again, here's the agenda. So what we're going to be talking about for tonight. After each section, we have a Q&A pause, so you can ask questions of us, and we can answer your questions and all that. We have backup staff from FCDOT here, as well as the technical team from Stout and Teague, Kimley Horn, and WMATA. So if we need to go and ask them questions or have them respond to questions, we can always call on them. So I am going to turn this over to Tim. I have your slide up here, sir, and you are on.
All right, thank you, Bob. Okay, so yeah, the first part of our presentation today is going to be talking about the Huntington Metro Rail Active Transportation Study. We introduced this to you all a couple meetings back. This was a grant that FCDOT had applied for as part of a MWCOG initiative to kind of do some studies that look at transportation and land use connections. And so this was a good fit for that grant program, and we've been working on it since about last fall, and it'll be wrapping up in the next couple months here. And we do have questions and answers at the end, but there's going to be a lot of new content here that you might not be used to seeing. So please feel free to raise your hand throughout or just chime in and let me know if you have a question on any of the slides. So we can go to the next slide. So what we're going to be talking about in relation to the study, give some background and purpose, which I've already kind of done, but kind of get more into what the purpose of the study is, the methodology behind it. So, when we talk about traffic analysis, we're looking at vehicular delay, we're looking at capacity on the roadway. This study, however, is looking at the perspective of the pedestrian, the perspective of the bicyclist. So there's a couple different metrics that are used to do that, and I'll go over how that's kind of conducted, the analysis that goes into putting together the study. We'll talk about the analysis scenarios. So we did an existing conditions analysis, just looking at what's out there today. And this is, again, looking at the entire TSA, the Huntington TSA. And then keeping in mind, we have plans for the future already in our comp plan and our bicycle master plan, our trails plan, looking at what it might look like in the future if we were to implement those plans. And then going beyond that to include some additional recommendations. How can we further enhance bicycle and pedestrian connectivity, comfort, and those sorts of things. So we'll talk about those recommendations, and then I'll talk about next steps. So as I said, the study's wrapping up, should be wrapping up in June. That's when the grant closes out. But we, FCDOT, and the rest of the folks that have been working on this study in the county will be doing some more outreach to the wider community, and of course talking again with you all as we move through this plan amendment process to see how we can incorporate some of the recommendations perhaps that come out of the study as they relate to the Metro Rail site. So we can go to the next slide. So again, this is an MWCOG funded study. We applied for this last spring and were awarded the grant to conduct the study, and we have a consultant on board, Fair and Pierce, who's been helping us work through this. And essentially what we're doing is assessing existing conditions around the transit station area. As you can see, that's highlighted in red. And then the TDA, the transit development area, is highlighted in yellow. You can see that with sort of the metro station in the center there. We're looking at the inventory of sidewalks, any bicycle facilities, and analyzing conditions for bicyclists, pedestrians, both existing and in the future, given current recommendations, to see how they may change. And then again, as I said, proposing recommendations that go beyond our current plans to see if we can get to an even better alternative for bicycles and pedestrians. So we can go to the next slide. And one other thing I wanted to mention, we talked a couple meetings ago, well, actually it was last meeting, we talked about the Dover-Cole study that was looking at interparcel connectivity. This really looks at the area outside of the Metro Rail station, so the TSA surrounding. We didn't want to overlap with what Dover-Cole is doing, but that being said, we are incorporating some of their recommendations, such as the connectivity across Huntington Avenue. And I did want to mention a takeaway from our last meeting. We did talk with the Disability Services Board, DSB. Their chair, Deborah Hammer, she is actually also the Mount Vernon district rep, and Claudia Villa, who works for Family Services at Fairfax County and is a liaison to DSB, about specifically the interparcel connectivity between Huntington Club and the Metro Rail station. So some of their considerations when we showed them sort of that concept where you saw the meandering trail and sort of the switchbacks that go up and towards the metro station. They weren't so opposed to the design as it was presented to them, but one thing that they did mention is, given the grades, something we'd want to consider in any sort of interparcel connection along that steep grade would be to include more landing space. So there are current requirements to have landings all along the route, and we showed those in our concept that Dover-Cole created, but they would like to see more of those, and so I think that's something that we can consider. This task force can certainly consider as we recommend plan text, as we make recommendations for any sort of interparcel access. I think that's something that would be important to consider, especially for the disabled. So all that being said, again, this is looking outside of the area, and I mentioned a couple different metrics that we looked at, and this is sort of a layout of what those metrics are. So bicycle level of traffic stress, you may have seen this before. We've used this metric in other county studies. We have a bike map that sort of incorporates this metric in Fairfax County. But essentially what this does is it takes the variables, as you can see along the top of that table there, posted speed, number of lanes on the adjacent roadway or the roadway that the cyclist is traveling on, the average daily traffic, the ADT, facility type, so whether it's a bicycle lane or if you're riding in mixed traffic or if there's a buffer, and it combines those, it produces a score for each of those given the number of lanes, as I said, that the posted speed, whether it's 25, 35, you get a different level of traffic stress based on what that variable is. For pedestrian level of comfort, sort of a similar concept. Again, you can see that the black dots there indicating what variables are considered for that metric: posted speed, number of lanes, facility type, presence of a buffer, the width of the sidewalk. So for example, a sidewalk that's at least 10 foot wide is going to get the highest level of comfort. Anything less than 6 feet is going to get the lowest level of comfort. So the lowest being a level 4. And I'll have another slide to kind of show that. And again, we look at each of these and we take all the scores, assess them individually, and the weakest link methodology is what they use. The weakest link of all those variables is what gives that facility segment its score. So if we can go to the next slide, I'll show you what that looks like. And actually, I think I see a hand raised. Catherine Ward, you have your hand raised?
Well, I'm sorry, but I keep losing your slides. I don't know why. And then it just shows up with an RP and a big circle in the middle of my screen. I don't know if anybody else is having that problem. So it may just be me and I'm doing something wrong, but I don't know what.
Anybody else? Everybody else able to see the slides okay?
I can see it fine. It's just
Okay.
acting weird in other ways, but that's just.
I mean, it's come back, but every now and again it just disappears and I get a black screen with the initial with circle with RP in it.
Yeah, the RP is me. So I just made the screen full size. So hopefully that helps.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Sorry.
No problem. So this is another look at, what each of these scores actually means. So again, as I said, level of comfort, LOC 1, that's kind of top of the line, highly comfortable. It's for all users. You're going to have wider sidewalks, as I said, 10 foot or greater in width, down to a level 4. That's the lowest level of comfort. You might not even have a sidewalk. And so that's kind of the range that we're looking at here. If you go to the next slide, LTS is sort of scored in a similar way. I don't think it's advanced yet. Oh.
Now I'm having issues, so hold on.
Yay, it's not just me.
Not just you. Oh. There we go. Sorry about that.
I'm not seeing it yet.
No screen.
Hey, Bob, when you click on the share button, try to select the window as opposed to the screen. And then from there, click on the PDF.
All right, let me try that. Click on the window, not the screen.
That's right. Yeah, try the window because that'll pull up the specific PDF application.
Okay, how's that working?
Got it.
Yeah, you're good now.
Okay, so this is level of traffic stress, and again, it's kind of a 4-point scale. LTS 1, that's the lowest level of traffic stress for a cyclist. So that's really kind of the goal, the ideal. But LTS 2 is sort of what we aimed for as an acceptable traffic stress level for this study. So most folks would feel comfortable riding on a street that's rated LTS 2. And then as you go down to LTS 4, you're going to be experiencing higher levels of traffic, so higher ADTs, average daily traffic, maybe higher speeds. And so a very small portion of the population would feel comfortable or attempt riding on a road that's rated LTS 4. So pretty simple concept. We can go to the next slide, which I believe we'll talk about kind of that weakest link methodology. If we can go to the next slide. There we go. So here's sort of an example of how this is applied. You can see if you look at the table towards the bottom of the page, you see that it's broken out differently for bicyclists and pedestrians. And you see for cyclists, posted speed, ADT, lane count, those are the variables that are being rated here. Posted speed, you get a level 3, being that the speed is 30 miles per hour. Oh, go ahead, Lynn. You have a question?
Yeah, I just are we talking about North Kings Highway? Are we talking about Huntington? We're not talking about any of the bicycle stuff in between, up and down the hill. Are we talking about between the Metro and Huntington Club?
So this is just one example. This is showing in the picture Huntington Avenue, which is west of Metroview Parkway. So this is just looking at that specific section of roadway. The study goes further and looks at other segments, which I'll show on the map in a minute. But this example looks at Huntington Avenue, and you can kind of see the breakdown towards the left of the image of all the different variables that apply to that roadway. So posted speed being 30 miles per hour, ADT is greater than 15,000 vehicles per day, 4 lanes across, and then what that looks like for a cyclist. Again, taking this weakest link approach, ADT is great, and therefore it gets an overall score of a level 4. So even though it scores a level 3 on posted speed, the speed limit's not too high, the lane counts, not excessive. There is a higher ADT, and so they take that sort of weakest link as the overall score for this particular segment.
I apologize just for sounding dumb and such, but are you going to talk later about the need for crosswalks and stoplights?
Yes.
I mean, that's what really is going to kill pedestrians there as it does now.
Yep. Yeah, they did an inventory of the crosswalks as well and have recommendations for that.
Okay.
As well.
Oh,
Yep.
thank you.
No problem.
You
Catherine.
tell me, yeah, I'm sorry. I'm
That's okay.
brain dead today. What is ADT again?
So ADT is average daily traffic. So there's for this stretch of Huntington Avenue, there are on average 15,000, more than 15,000 actually, vehicles that use this roadway per day. And so that's.
And what does a 4 score say to me?
So that's basically the highest stress level. So again, looking at the stress levels, you have 1 through 4.
Right.
4 is the highest. Yep.
Got it. Thank you.
No problem. And so again, same case for pedestrians. You have a host of different variables, as you can see on the bottom of that table: posted speed, lane count, buffer type. You have a couple 2s in there, a couple 3s, but the sidewalk width, again, being less than 6 feet, takes that rating down. So again, using the weakest link approach, you're going to get an overall score of a 4. So to improve that, obviously, you'd want to address the sidewalk width, increase the sidewalk width on Huntington Avenue. And so that is one recommendation that we've looked at, and I'll go over those later on. Any other questions on this slide? All right, we can go to the next one.
Yeah, I have
go ahead.
Weakest link means if anything gets a 4, everything gets a 4. I don't quite understand.
Yeah, so that's the overall score. So even if everything rated a 2, for example, for pedestrian level of comfort, and then you had a very narrow sidewalk, less than 6 feet, that would give you an overall score of 4. Now, I do want to caveat this. This is something that the county has not really done before. We haven't used this methodology. This is something that Fair and Peers, the consultant on this study, is using. We are doing a somewhat similar project in West Falls Church, looking at their transit station area, where we're looking at pedestrian level of comfort, but it's more of kind of a combined score. So there are different ways of looking at this. This is not necessarily the best or the worst, but it's just one way of kind of looking at and assessing different pedestrian and bicycle facilities based on these variables that can affect stress and comfort. We have
another question, please. You
Yep.
mentioned that in this instance, the sidewalk would need to be widened,
right,
to reduce the stress level, the overall score, I guess.
Right, exactly.
So are you going to address anywhere in this presentation, or is someone going to look at, when you say that, how would you intend on widening this sidewalk to accommodate more, I assume the bikes would go on there and more people? Because when I look at this, you've got a whole row of trees right on the sidewalk. Are you intending to recommend that every tree gets mowed down so you can have a wider place for people to ride and walk?
No, that would be the last thing we want, I think. We do have recommendations, and I'll talk about those towards the end. But yeah, we realize in a lot of these circumstances, we would need to get a little creative in how we use the space, because right now there's not a whole lot of right of way to use for pedestrians and cyclists. So I'll just kind of spoil it. We have recommended, in this case, looking at the possibility of a road diet. A road diet being, taking away one through travel lane in each direction, repurposing that space for pedestrian and cyclist use. But a big caveat with that, of course, is we would need to do a traffic study to assess whether or not that's feasible. Obviously, there's the vehicular traffic and transit use still needs to be considered and taken into account. But there's certainly trade-offs in doing something like that. But that is one of the recommendations that is put forward in this study.
Could I break back in again? I'm still I'm still lost on something or other. Are we talking about today or are we talking about 25 years from now?
So this is a long range plan. Shouldn't even call it a plan. It's really just a study to see what we could recommend to improve these metrics. Some of them are short term. Some of them can be easy fixes. A lot of the, striping out crosswalks and adding high visibility crosswalks in places would obviously be something that we could look at addressing sooner rather than later. But yeah, there are these more big ticket items, a road diet, as I said, being one of them that would require further study and obviously quite a bit of work to, kind of bring in the curb, so to speak, and allow that extra space for other uses. All right, we can move on to the next slide. Okay, a little bit of a lag. Okay, there it is. So yeah, I mentioned we did look at the kind of the inventory of the crossings within the TSA, and we noted that there are 10 locations around the TSA that are missing marked crosswalks, and kind of looking beyond that to the spacing of where these crosswalks occur. There are stretches, especially along kind of the major roads here, Huntington Avenue and North Kings Highway, where there are no crosswalks for over a couple thousand feet. So Huntington Avenue between Biscayne Drive and Foley Street, you have over 2,000 feet before you reach a crossing. Standard practice, industry best practice, so to speak. A lot of people would recommend spacing these crosswalks, especially around a transit station area, no more than 400 to 500 feet apart. You're going to have people crossing where there's no marked crosswalk. And so really encouraging people to cross where it's safe to do so is a goal that we could probably look at. And then there are 6 uncontrolled crosswalks in the study area, 3 on Huntington Avenue and 3 on North Kings. So again, we'll look at what's recommended as part of the study to sort of improve that situation on a later slide. Oh, go ahead, Lynn.
Yeah. When you start getting argument back from people how this is going to slow everything down, would you please refer to Alexandria City? All you have to do is coordinate those stop signs so they don't slow the traffic down really. And you could make it so people could walk across the street without being killed. It's a disaster now. I'm happy you're pointing it out along there.
Yep, that's a good point. Okay, I think we can go to the next slide. Okay, so again, this study is still in progress, so we'll get these maps cleaned up and hopefully provide a little more clarity on them. But this is a look at the existing conditions. So what it looks like today for pedestrian level of comfort. And you can sort of make out on the bottom left the legend. Most comfortable, again, being a LOC 1 is in green, and then least comfortable is in that sort of reddish dark orange. And so you can see existing today, there's a lot of 3s and 4s. You've got a couple 2s in the residential areas because you have slower moving traffic, lower ADT, average daily traffic. But the main thoroughfares here, Huntington Avenue and North Kings Highway, obviously don't rate very well. Again, if we move on to the next slide, you can see somewhat of a similar situation for cyclists. Huntington Avenue, North Kings don't fare very well, but you do have some alternative routes that could be lower stress for cyclists existing today, as you can see the green outlines there along some of the residential roads. And then that sort of tail on the northern end of Telegraph Road is where they have a off-street facility that cyclists can use a paved trail. So looking next at the next slide, these are improvements that are both within the county's current planning documents, so within the comprehensive plan, taking into account the countywide trails plan, for example. And we also incorporated, there is a resolution put forward by the Jefferson Manor Association, JMCA, and was also adopted by MVCCA to sort of look at North Kings Highway south of the metro station down to Richmond Highway. And so those recommendations are highlighted in purple and italicized here, but basically allocating the excess space on North Kings Highway from narrowing the travel lanes, allocating that space to pedestrians and cyclists, installing a hawk beacon at the crosswalk directly in front of Mount Eagle Elementary School, which is actually now a part of the BRT plan. Vanessa had actually presented on that on the 28th. And then, of course, the other proposed improvements, as I said, are from the comprehensive plan. So installing a 10-foot path, 5-foot landscape buffer along North Kings Highway. And you see, what that does to the scores. Still not, where we'd like to see them. Again, we're kind of striving for 2 or better, but you do see a little bit better level of comfort for pedestrians. A couple more areas where you have a 3 more comfortable walking network for peds. So we can go to the next slide and see what these recommendations do for bicycle level of traffic stress. And again, improvements certainly on Huntington Avenue. Of course, if we're including a shared use path on Huntington Avenue, that's taking cyclists off the street and allowing them to be separated from traffic, therefore giving them a lower level of traffic stress. And North Kings Highway, of course, south of the metro station, given the limited right of way, there's difficulty in kind of improving that score. So what can we do to further build upon these recommendations? And that's what Fair and Pierce looked at. So the next slide, we'll talk about a couple of those. One of the concepts they put forward was a slow streets concept. And, this really took off in the pandemic. There's a couple of more urban areas that pursued this idea of partially closing off the street and local streets, residential streets, to residential local traffic only or local deliveries only, and then using signage to also indicate that these are slower speed streets, so speeds of 15 miles per hour or less. So San Francisco did this, Washington, D.C. did this with a little bit of mixed success. I know D.C. has discontinued their program post-pandemic. I don't think it was successful everywhere. I think in some spots people ignored the barriers, their temporary barriers. However, San Francisco has sort of gone beyond this concept and instituted more permanent measures, as you can see on the bottom right. That's one project that has taken hold in San Francisco post-pandemic to again indicate with more permanent bollards or flexi posts that this stretch of roadway is really intended for local traffic, slower speeds, and to sort of share that roadway with pedestrians and cyclists. So this is something that we have not done in Fairfax County or even Virginia. And would really, if we wanted to pursue this, would need to be a pilot project and would require a little bit further study onto how we could sort of implement this and what the effects might be. Go ahead, Lynn.
I'm sorry for talking so much, but has anybody looked at the topography around there? I mean, the streets don't go through. So there's not other alternative streets there that you can just run through. And if you do, on one side, you're going to go way down the hill and back up. No pedestrian is going to do that. And a bicyclist has to be in pretty good shape to go up and down those hills.
Thanks, Lynn. I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, if you're heading north on North Kings Highway and you go down to the next street onto the left, you go way down under the hill and have to go back up a tall hill. On the right, there's no such thing as a street. None exists. So you can't. I mean, this is somehow just not relevant at all, it seems to me.
Sure. Well, I think there might be some examples where this could apply. So looking at kind of the north side of Huntington Avenue, I'll show on the map later on where we might be able to consider some of these things. But kind of north of Huntington towards the community center, where it's not as steep of a grade, you might be able to implement some of these slow streets with really the goal of providing better connectivity to the Cameron Run Trail. So allowing people to cross Huntington Avenue, and then use those streets that connect to the Cameron Run Trail without worrying about excess vehicular traffic or higher speed traffic. So it's just one solution. It, again, might not be the best solution. It was an idea that Baron Pierce kind of brought to the table and has been tried in a couple of places and may work for Fairfax County, may not, but something to at least maybe consider. We can go to the next slide, and here's another concept that I mentioned earlier on, which is the road diet. And again, the general idea behind this, as you can see on the image on the right, is to take what is a car-oriented street with a lot of lanes and parking, and sort of pinch that in and give it a diet, so to speak, and reallocate some of that space for pedestrians, cyclists, even dedicated bus lanes. And so that is something that Baron Pierce proposed doing for Huntington Avenue. So removing one of the through lanes in each direction between Telegraph Road and Richmond Highway, and then you'd be able to provide more space for pedestrian and cyclist activity. Go ahead, Lynn. Oh, you're muted, Lynn. Lynn, you're still muted.
Oh, I'm sorry. What is that long dark thing supposed to suggest over there when you make a road diet down the 2 lanes?
Oh, so that is supposed to be a bus. So that sort of that red shading on the right, you could use a road diet to stripe out a dedicated bus lane, for example. So essentially, it's taking all these. Huntington Avenue has 4 lanes, 4 through lanes. That is, if we did a traffic study and determined, well, we only need 2 through lanes. If there's not a capacity need there, we could repurpose some of that space for a bus lane, a dedicated bus lane. We could repurpose it for protected bike lanes, and again, move the curbs in, even perhaps to expand the sidewalk or put in a shared use path. So just a recommendation to sort of think through how we can find the space for these other uses, and there would need to be some sort of additional analysis to see whether or not that's feasible.
And Tim, this is Walter. Sorry if I missed this, but the car-oriented street, the gray shaded cars there, are those parked cars or?
Right. So that's showing a parking lane on either side, and then you have kind of 3 lanes of travel in the middle there.
Right. Which I don't think we would want because we don't have parking along there now, correct? Right.
Right. Well, so this is just an example. This is not to meant to represent Huntington Avenue, but kind of just showing what you could do. So if you have a parking lane, you could include a couple bump outs to put tree pits, or kind of reallocate that space and space out the parking along the corridor.
Yeah, my opinion is I don't think we want to recommend or suggest parking along the street there. So,
right.
Anyway, that's just my opinion. All right, thank you.
Go ahead, Catherine.
First of all, I laud you for a lot of this already. Road diets are great. And since we in the county are pushing towards more environmentally friendly mass transit, with the BRT and things of that sort, I think we have to do more in the transportation from FCDOT and VDOT to recommend these kind of things and not be afraid of it. I did some poking around recently because of what's going on Route 1 with the BRT and FCDOT and VDOT wanting to widen that road. And in the census, I came up with some very interesting statistics, and I'm wondering if you guys have looked at that stuff as well. Fairfax County, according to the census, most recent census, has only 4% of the population are without cars. But in the Hybela Valley area, of Richmond Highway, it is 24% of folks do not have automobiles. So they're relying on foot traffic, bike traffic, and mass transit of some type. Yet VDOT and in some cases FCDOT are continually pushing for wider and more car-centric roads. So have you guys looked at the statistics of in and around North Kings Highway and Huntington Avenue, what the stats are for people without automobiles?
So I don't have the specific statistics that you cited, but we do use the vulnerability index to sort of look at that. We haven't included that in this study, but we can do that. For example, I mentioned the West Falls Church active transportation study that we're also pursuing. We kind of looked at the vulnerability index there, and that gives you kind of a sense of car ownership based on different segments of the population around the county. And so, yeah, that is a really great resource and sort of makes the point that we do need to accommodate pedestrians and cyclists in these specific areas. That looking at that 4%, as you mentioned, countywide is not necessarily representative of these other areas that we're targeting.
And I'll add to Tim's point. We did look, Catherine, at the Huntington census tract in particular, and looked at specifically that I think the census tract calls it, or the census question is, how many vehicles do you have available in your household, as being kind of that metric of carlessness, because that is, as you're describing, a real indicator of whether or not somebody's going to need some other alternative to a vehicle. So we've definitely looked at that as we've been kind of mapping out the demographics of the area to get a better sense of what are the needs out there.
But yeah, good point. Okay, I think we can go to the next slide. It's freezing up a little bit. There we go. Okay, so this is obviously a very wordy slide, but I want to capture all of the recommendations being proposed as part of the study, kind of consolidate them. So we will be posting this online, so you kind of go back and read through these and see which ones you like. And if you have any comments on them, again, we're going to be doing more outreach as part of the study to talk through these with the larger community. But this is a list of recommendations by street that kind of go beyond the ones I already talked about that are proposed in the comprehensive plan and the North Kings resolution. And so you see a lot of them are, as I mentioned, the slow streets, improving the sidewalk quality. So not only widening the sidewalk, but Fair and Pierce, when they did their assessment, they went out and did a field study. They noticed areas that had cracked sidewalk or uneven pavement. So just kind of making those improvements, those maintenance and upkeep improvements could help comfort, certainly. And then, lighting, pedestrian scale lighting is a big one. So making sure that people can see at night. We're not just lighting the roadway for vehicles, but providing lighting that's at the pedestrian scale so that people feel more comfortable as they're walking at night, of course. And then, as I mentioned earlier on, looking at areas where we might be able to implement new crossings or make crossings more visible. So adding rapid flashing beacons or adding signage so you can see on Huntington Avenue a little farther down. Recommendation number 4, adding pedestrian refuge island and RRFB, which is a rectangular rapid flashing beacon at a mid-block crossing. Both on Catherine Street and Metroview Parkway, and then at Foley Street and Hunting Creek Road, excuse me. So again, a big list, and I did mention that some of these we could probably get done rather cheaply, quickly. Obviously, there are others that would take much heavier lift and a bit more long range. But some of these would simply just need a study. So North Kings Highway, for example, reducing the posted speeds to 30 miles per hour, Huntington Avenue reducing the posted speeds to 25 miles per hour. Just thinking about doing a speed study to make those streets more pedestrian oriented could be a possibility as well. We have a question. Oh, Ellen, go ahead.
Yes, so I just want, it's more of a comment when you talk about those rapid flashing signs to slow down pedestrian crossing. You are in a residential area, a lot of homes along there, townhouses, and so I would not recommend those. It's going to get in people's bedrooms, living rooms, and it's, you know, strobe effect. Bad news.
Okay. Okay, that's a good comment. I hadn't considered that. Okay, did I see another comment in the chat? Okay, that was Joanne sharing some statistics. Lynn, you have one?
Yeah, not that I never disagree with Ellen or anything else, but that's a death trap down there until something is done to really stop the cars so people can walk across. So, you know, to her point, maybe you could do something other than super bright or whatever, but there's got to be some way to be stopping cars so people can walk across. I also noticed that, at least I didn't see it here on your map, there's the worst place is across between the two shopping centers. But this gets to me the question of whether we're talking about today or we're talking about years from now. If we're talking about years from now, there probably won't be those two shopping centers there, but there certainly are now, and people cross that street all the time. I'm always ducking them.
Yeah, so I think those are sort of improvements that we could look at in the more immediate term. The crossings, you know, being a lower cost, easier to implement solution in many cases, at least. Do we have another? Oh, Catherine, you have a question?
Yeah, just a comment is that we now have, I want to say 200 units, but I don't swear me by that. You already have a comprehensive plan that's been approved for the open space next to the Parker. That's going to have a lot more people, and that's going to happen very soon. This is not 20 years from now. You've also got the low-income housing that Wesley Housing, I believe, is building, and that's going to be ready for occupancy pretty quickly. I'm not sure how many units are in there, but quite a few, and those are right near those little strip mall shopping things. So some of this stuff should get implemented straight away.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point with that. I mean, you look at this list, and there's quite a lot to do. So again, kind of going back to the West Falls Church example, that's the big thing that we're looking at now. We've developed this list of recommendations, and now we're looking at, okay, how do we prioritize them? There's a lot of improvements that are great here. We'd like to see them all, but some we really would like to see sooner rather than later. And what, you know, what are those? I think that's going to be a big component of the outreach that we do following the report, is to kind of get that feedback from the community to see what they'd like to see done sooner rather than later. We have another question, it looks like. Jason?
Yes, hi. Thanks. I'm with the Huntington Community Association, and this is something that we actually talk about pretty on a monthly basis, the Huntington Avenue crosswalks. And we did submit a letter to Supervisor Stork and I think maybe county staff, you know, requesting a study on Huntington Avenue. And we were told that because this is already under review as part of the SSPA, that this process would take precedence. So I guess, so my question would be, you're saying some of these are easy to do, all we need is a traffic study. What would be the process for us to do that within the SSPA?
So I don't think that it would take place necessarily within the SSPA process. I think it would have to be a separate study. But again, we, as part of this, we have outreach meetings that we're going to be holding, and we'll get that feedback from the community to sort of get a consensus on which of these we want to see prioritized. And then from there, we can see where, you know, where our next steps might be if we need to conduct studies, a speed study, for example, to determine whether a crossing, a mid-block crossing is appropriate, or whether we want to use RFBs versus some other type of signage. I think we can certainly pursue that if there's
okay. And yeah, I'd just like to echo what Lynn said. I think that, you know, our biggest concern, at least the people that attend the Huntington Community Association meeting, I think would be in favor for flashing signs on. I mean, that's one of the things that gets brought up the most, is if we can get some sort of flashing crosswalk or something to that effect. So I'll just add that. But thank you.
Okay, thank you. That's good feedback. Okay, I think we can go to the next slide, and the next couple slides will show, given this list of recommendations, if these were to be carried out, what would be the effect on those metrics we talked about. So the first one is pedestrian comfort. You can see that throughout the whole TSA, we've achieved that level 2 for pedestrian comfort. So you have a network that is actually comfortable for pedestrians to use. And you can see the blue circles are where new crossings would be proposed. So the one kind of towards the south near the school is obvious, as I said, something that's being proposed as part of the BRT. I think they have either a rapid flashing beacon or a hawk signal being proposed at that location. And then along Huntington Avenue, you see kind of just north of the station. That's the same location that we talked about with the Dover Coal study, having that crossing that would then take people over towards the trail through the Cameron Run Trail, that is, through a connection north of Huntington Avenue. And then another one sort of east of that down Huntington Avenue towards Mount Vernon Drive. New crossing being proposed there. Lynn, go ahead.
But that's nowhere near your 400 or 500 feet. Those are still long walks in between there.
Yeah, but between those, certainly, yes. There would still be some long walks.
And there are only about 2 others there, I think, in the whole distance.
Yeah, one thing that would be helpful, and we can create this map for the study, is to also include the existing crosswalks, as I showed on an earlier slide. But there would still be certainly cases where the spacing does exceed 400 feet. So it would not be a perfect solution by any means, but certainly kind of improve upon access to the trail, in between the trail and the other side of Huntington. Okay, we can go to the next slide, and this shows the results for bicycle. Oops, skipped one. There we go. Bicycle level of traffic stress is markedly improved. As you can see, a lot of the recommendations take the cyclist off of the roadway, and so when you do that, level of traffic stress doesn't really apply. You're separated from traffic in a sense. North Kings Highway, you still don't see the highest level, sorry, I should say the lowest level of traffic stress south of the station. Again, due to the right-of-way constraints, but taking into consideration that there are lanes that could potentially be narrowed, and there is some space as the North Kings Highway resolution that JMCA and MVCCA proposed could kind of incorporate a wider pathway by using the median strip along the sidewalk. There is a solution that could kind of improve bicycle level traffic stress along the whole stretch there. So we can go to the next slide, and I believe this is pretty much it for this presentation. As I did say a couple times, we are still finalizing this study. We have Fair and Peers on until about June, so a few more weeks. And then beyond, kind of them tightening up the report for us, we're going to go out to the community, go out to various other stakeholders to sort of get their take on this, see if there's anything that we need to update or change, and then finalize the study report. And then for you all, again, kind of taking it back to the recommendations that would be relevant to the Metro Rail station, and for this plan amendment, looking at North Kings Highway and Huntington Avenue as they front the site, considering those, for the plan text. Going beyond that, even we've mentioned at a prior meeting the active Fairfax plan. That's a county-wide plan that's sort of condensing and incorporating both the bicycle master plan and the countywide trails plan into one document, one planning document. We would be coordinating the recommendations with them to see if there are any that could be carried forward as part of that effort. And I think we have a hand raised. Mary Payton, go ahead.
Yeah, this is just a detail, but on just a previous map about the bike connectivity, does that mean, is that showing that the two green loops, the one by the community center and the other one at the deep end of Fenwick Lane. I think it is, those green marks. Do they not connect with the trail along the river or along the creek? Is Mount Vernon Drive not a connection to the trail?
So Mount Vernon Drive does connect. So I should have clarified this earlier on. Not every street within the TSA was assessed. This was a kind of limited study in that sense. Not a lot of money for this study, so they were limited in scope and what they could look at. But we selected streets that we thought kind of contributed to the overall network in the TSA. That being said, of course, Mount Vernon Drive does connect all the way up to Cameron Run Trail, so that would be a street that, if we wanted to sort of assess that after the fact, using the methodology that Fair and Peers has shown us, we could certainly do that, and I think that would be a great connection to the trail.
Is there another connection to the west besides the one right off of Telegraph Road?
Yeah, so you have some connections towards the west by the Parker, for example, and then I had mentioned one that Dover Cole had looked at, kind of incorporating a new crossing just north of the metro station to connect north up to the Cameron Run Trail as well. So there are certainly other areas where you could connect to the trail, and as part of the study, we can maybe come up with a map that would show that a little better, to show the existing connections and some of the planned connections, because that's an important asset certainly to this area is that trail.
I used to live in that neighborhood, and I just wanted to make sure that the local people had access to the trail along the creek.
Yep, definitely. Okay. Were there any other questions? That's it. My email is here, so if you have any follow-up after the meeting, certainly reach out to me, and I'll continue to keep you all informed on how this study is progressing, and we can come back to the task force, in future meetings to kind of give you more information on our outreach efforts for this study. Let's see, Go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question. In your last slide, you indicated, comp plan language, which the SSPA task force is going to make a decision on. And then when will we see that? What's the schedule, the plan for that?
So, Graham.
Yeah, Catherine. So one thing we wanted to go over kind of at the end of the transportation presentations was that exact thing, which is kind of next steps. But spoiler alert, next month. So stay tuned. We'll get into the details.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions before we go on to the next? All right.
Look, Mary has her hand up.
Oh, Mary.
I just didn't put it down.
Okay, Bob, you're up.
Yeah. Hey, Tim, thank you very much.
Thank you all.
All right, Bob, up, sir.
Okay, thank you. I have the transportation analysis. I'm going to go through it for everyone, so we can recap what we've been working on the last few months, and then also some of the results that have come up, and the mitigation strategies proposed by Kimley Horn, Stout and Teague, and WMATA. So again, why we do transportation analyses is, well, there's new land uses being proposed at the station. There's going to be additional people, maybe new residents, or there will be new residents, and that there's going to be new trips, new growth that are associated with the transit station. And there will be also probably single occupant vehicles driving to and past this station site. We're also looking at the growth in the region as one of the factors. So everyone's driving to and from and around this area. And they're also looking at, we're also looking at regional traffic and how that affects the transit station area. So as we're doing these TIAs, we do look at the TOD guidelines. These are in the policy plan for the county. So I'm just going to go through these fairly quickly. There's a link at every slide, and you can get to that as well. But when we're looking at transit proximity and stationary boundaries, we're looking at the access to the Metro Rail station along Huntington Avenue, North Kings Highway. We're looking at accommodating the future BRT system and definitely not precluding the potential for the yellow line extension. So that's one of the TOD policies. Our guidelines, that is. We're looking at pedestrian bicycle access. Tim gave a really great presentation about bike and ped access, so we're looking at recommendations from that as well. That works into the TIA analysis. We're not trying to preclude the benefits that pedestrian bicycle access will have, so we need to accommodate that with the TIA analysis as well. Let's see here. This is picky on the advancement here. Street design. So we're looking at safe gridded streets, attractive streets, but we're also looking at still mobilizing the vehicles that can get through the area. But we're also looking at looking at other modes or transit modes or transportation modes in the area. So, but we're seeing the accommodation for on-street, not necessarily on-street parking, because we just heard that, but wider sidewalks, street trees and such, and then parking on the site for the transit use. And I'll have a presentation about the parking garages on the site and after this, and also that we're trying to maintain adequate structured parking. So it's just the transit use itself, but then also for the new uses that there's adequate parking provided by the new land uses as well. Transportation and traffic. We're also looking at transportation demand management that happens as the project is being constructed, built. That we're looking at ways to get people out of the single occupant vehicles. See if there's a ride sharing program or bus transit planning. Well, there's buses here. Parking management, alternative work schedules. We're kind of like in that now with or coming out of that from the COVID. We have teleworking and then other non-motorized options like bicyclists or other means, or just even walking. Those are strategies that can be employed. So those are the background, the TOD guidelines. And it's trying to advance. So as we started the analysis, this is with Kimley Horn. So they did the primary part of the analysis, and we had provided them with a lot of data from surrounding properties in the area. And since they started the analysis during the pandemic, it was early 2020, late 2020, early 2021. We weren't able to get out there and do traffic counts, so we had to look at the other studies in the area for determining what their traffic impact analyses were, and we used that data to give to Kimley Horn to do the to determine what the traffic volumes might be, or like what the traffic might be like in the year 2019. You use 2019 as the base year. That was pre-pandemic, so we had a lot of information from the North Gateway CBC. We had their TIA, Huntington Crossing, the Parker, also 2550 here at the corner. Huntington Club has its rezoning TIA that was used, the Arden, Abington, and even we went down to South Alex in the PennDOT area for information gathering. So all of that was used, combined to put together the analysis. And let's see, trying to advance slides. Boy, there we go. Okay, so there was 24 intersections done with this analysis. They're all scattered throughout. So along Huntington Avenue, North Kings Highway, Richmond Highway, and Telegraph Road. We had a couple here, or 3 here in the North Gateway area. And I'll talk about those as well. We had some in the Pendle area as well. So we pretty much canvassed the whole area to try to get a sense of what impacts might be along all 24 intersections and see where there's possibilities of mitigations or see what the impacts are based on the land uses that are proposed at the Huntington Metro Station. So, all right, so as part of the 2019 ADTs, or average annual daily trip AADTs, to mention ADTs as well, same thing. So these are for 2019, we used this as part of the analysis. So you can see on Huntington Avenue, we have 16,000 vehicles in the 2019, 50,000 from Huntington Avenue north to the Beltway. This is along Richmond Highway, and then south of Huntington Avenue, we have about 55,000 vehicles per day. Telegraph Road is split into two, north and south of Franconia Road, 37,000 up to the Beltway, 20,000 south of Franconia, and then North Kings Highway has a volume of 24,000. So we use that as the basis of the analysis to determine basic trip volumes before the pandemic. And okay, so moving on. And so on the conceptual land use plan, we've seen this before from Stout and Teague and the WMATA. So nothing much has changed here. What's here identified in the blue dots are the intersections that were part of the study, as the previous map shown, that there's 3 intersections that are part of the study on North Kings Highway, 2 on Huntington Avenue. And these are existing driveways or existing streets. You'll see, like in this one here on Huntington Avenue, it's a new connection. However, it's not an existing connection. So that has yet to be designed, but we did look at the existing driveway cuts or roadways that feed into Huntington Avenue, Huntington Station, from the north and from the south sides. And so what the analysis was looking at the maximum that they could do per the comp plan amendment. So we looked at what the land units have in around the station. So the current comp plan already accounts for 48 dwelling units, which is the pavilions at Huntington Metro, 802 dwelling units that are part of Huntington and Huntington Club and Avonton. And I'm looking at current comp plan, sorry, and then 250,000 square feet office and 30,000 square feet of retail. With the proposed comp plan from the previous slide, the applicants, or Stout and Teague and WMATA, are looking at to add 685 mid-rise residential units, 815 high-rise dwelling units, more square footage for office, and more for the retail. Altogether, with the residential, it'll be 2,350 residential units in land units E and F. They're looking at 335,000 square feet of office and 47,000 square feet of retail. So that is what was analyzed in the TIA. When they come back in with their rezoning, they may change the programming and such, but we wanted to have them maximize their development potential with the TIA, so we know that this bar is set at this level, and what mitigations, what levels of service, or what impacts are to the intersections and to the streets and such. So that's where we started from. That was their base. And so with this, we also we had them take a look at what the trip generation is. And this is just a basic formula for looking at how much trips are generated by the land uses in the current comp plan, and then what their proposed land uses were from the previous slide. So we're looking at, in the current comp plan, it's 4,661, but their proposed land uses bring it up to 9,377, which is a difference of 4,716. So 4,716 net new trips on the roadways between Huntington Avenue and North Kings Highway. Those are the 2 major access points and such. So, and we have the AM and PM peak hour trips, so you have that as a measurement here as well. So, okay. I'm going through these fairly quickly, but I just wanted to make sure we get to the good new stuff as well. So this is how we generate trip generation. This is based on the Institute of Transportation Engineers. There's a trip generation manual. And what they do is they code it by residential type or office type and shopping center. And they do it by the variable is either a one dwelling unit, how many trips are generated in a weekday and an AM and PM peak, or if it's per 1,000 square feet of office or retail. So with this slide, I just want to show you what the comparison is on what use generates the most trips. And in this case, a shopping center retail is almost 38 trips in the daily, in the 24-hour daily period. But when you look at residential, you're looking at between 7.3. If you get low rise up to 2 levels of residential, and then if you have 10 plus levels, the higher density multifamily residential, you have 4.45. So it gives you can use this as a base as how trip generation is calculated for the residential units, the office space, and then retail as well. Catherine,
Bob,
go ahead.
Maybe I'm just dense. Is this based on a location that has mass transit, or is this stuff based on VDOT is always focused on cars?
Yeah, so the IT trip generation is nationwide, and it's based on different studies from different states, and they're looking at there are some instances where they are next to a transit station, but it's hard to pick those out. So there's maybe 40, 50 different studies that compile into the IT trip gen manual. So Tom Burke, you have.
I was just going to share that in terms of Catherine's question about proximity to metro, we're on that. Our site analysis section has developed trip reduction factors for just for that, because we have found in some cases that they don't necessarily reflect a location. And Mark may be in the dark here. He might not want to speak, but we have trip reduction factors just for that cause to kind of make up for the differences that we have found through studies for proximity to the metro.
Yeah, actually, I did skip that over on the previous slide. So I just want to mention that in the transit station, we do allow a 45% vehicle trip credit. We're also looking at internal captures as the trips within the site itself, and then trips that are like pass by. So these are 3 different credits because of the transit station that the applicant that Wilmot and Kimley Horn have taken to reduce the number of daily vehicle trips. So it's an allowed credit that they can take because of the transit station.
I don't understand what you mean. What are you allowing?
Oh, so
I know what you're saying. I don't understand what it means.
All right. So in the transit station is like we have all this proposed residential use. So they can take, not everyone's going to be driving to the transit station to get there because they're already on site. So you can do a reduction of up to 45%. In the Tysons area next to the metro stations, they also do a credit as well, that because they're on a metro station, they don't always have to drive to the transit facility, or they can walk to it. So you're taking people out of a car, you're just having them walk to the station.
Credit for what?
So the ITE is a national document that, like Bob said, is data from all over the country, and we call those gross trips. Like if there was nothing else, it would generate X number of trips. But we know that we have proximity to metro. We have mixed use has internal synergy, that trips are satisfied within the same site. We have retail pass by, so the trip reduction factor kind of factors the proximity to metro and other trip interactions that makes it more like a local. It's that 45% is based on local studies that we have done over the years.
For what, Tom? I'm sorry, I'm really stupid tonight, but to what end? We make roads narrower? To what end does a trip credit
It's
provide?
all we're talking about in this slide is trip generation. How many trips that we would anticipate being generated by the site. That's all we're talking about.
Okay, but to what end does that then move us? We make narrower street, because it's all tied together. We make narrower streets, we put in more bike lanes. What is it that we do with that?
You just saw Tim give an hour presentation on how enthusiastic we are to improve the bicycle pedestrian facilities within the Huntington area. So that's not what we're doing. We're talking about potential road diets, slow roads. We are not all about adding lanes and satisfying cars. We spent an hour talking about them.
I'm not picking on you. What I'm asking is, with all of these credits, because we understand we're in a TOD.
Right.
So
what it get us at some point? Is it going to then provide us with what Tim just talked about, or is it just, I don't know.
I guess I wouldn't really look at it as a credit per se. It's more of a reduction. So we're assuming that there are going to be fewer people using cars given that we're at a transit station. Therefore, you're going to be showing less trips, and you're not going to have to mitigate those trips. There's fewer trips to mitigate. And mitigations being, a lot of times solutions are to do what you said, widen the roadway, add turn lanes. In this case, we're trying to avoid that. And this reduction of trips is kind of helping that cause. We're assuming more people are going to be biking, walking, using transit given the location. So we're reducing the number of trips by a certain percentage.
Right.
Excellent, Tim. Excellent explanation.
Thank
you, Tim.
Right. So
thank you. Got it.
Catherine and others is like there's a number of things that we gave to Kimley Horn of tasks not to do, not to widen the roads, not to add turn lanes, but use the existing right of way that they had and then look at mitigations. And I'll talk about those in a few. Is you have to account for the stuff that's already out there. We don't want you to add add lanes because that decreases the time for or increases the time for pedestrians to cross the roads. That adds capacity to the roads. We don't want to see more cars here. We want to be able to manage the vehicles that are there. And so this table is just like a predictor of what could be there in the daily. So with the proposed land uses. It's just one of the things we use for the analysis. It's just a predictor of what might be happening there. And I'm going to move on. Mary Patty, you have a question. I saw your hand up.
Yeah, the next slide, it looks like there's some reduction of baked into this chart too with high-rise residential. It seems like weekday there's less trips.
National data.
Low-rise residential, is that per unit? And
this is per unit, per dwelling unit. There's 4.45 trips per residential use. So it could be just the studies that were taken in other parts of the country. They said that we're doing a 10-story high-rise, and it's maybe one person or one couple or one unit has one vehicle or no vehicles.
Typically, the taller
are different in high-rise than low-rise.
Typically, the taller buildings have smaller units too, and therefore not as much for families. If you had single-family homes on this list as well, you'd see that single-family homes generate the most trips because they're usually, not always, but often families with a lot of kids that also drive. And then as you go to townhouse and low-rise, mid-rise, high-rise, you kind of get fewer and fewer trips. And I think a lot of it's because the units generally get smaller as well, and the number of occupants tend to reduce.
Right. Is that okay, Mary, or?
Yeah, I guess.
Okay. Catherine, is your hand still up for this, or you have another question? She doesn't. I will move on. So in the when we're doing the transportation analysis, there's an understanding that we have with VDOT, and also along with our transportation policy plan. So I mentioned this level of service D. It's because it's on the on-street network that the county and VDOT also share that level of service D, which is under 50 seconds of delay on signalized intersections. That is what the target goal is, LOSD. However, we have an MOU, a memorandum of understanding with VDOT in the Northern Virginia district, that in and around transit station, because of the uses there, we can accept up to a level service E, which is, I believe, I forget the number it is. 80 seconds, right? Up to an 80-second delay at the intersection. So, but this is something that we have with in other transit station areas. Huntington Transit Station is named in this MOU. And we also look at the roads that are not part of the national highway system. So that way we can have LOSE on some intersections. Richmond Highway in this corridor is the national highway system, so it has to retain its LOSD standard. It cannot go up to LOSE because of it's an emergency route or evacuation route, but it's also part of it's Route 1. It's the part of the national highway system. And also, so we're looking at with this MOU, we're looking at efficient transit-oriented development so that more gets to the vehicle access to the site, but also for pedestrian and bicycle improvements. And we're looking at this MOU applies to comp plan amendments, rezonings, use permits, and other transportation studies. Lynn, you have a question, sir. Oh, you're on mute, sir. Oh, still on mute. Sorry, Lynn. Lynn, I can't hear you. You're on mute.
I apologize. I was sitting here cheering you on as you were saying all the right things about Huntington Avenue, but then I was ready to throw something at you when you talked about Route 1. I don't believe that there's the same level of service, which is our big bugaboo that gets thrown at us all the time as a reason which we think it doesn't apply to urban main streets. And it certainly must not apply to Alexandria City, nor Washington, D.C. You still have to get emergency vehicles down them. Sure. And when we're urbanizing Richmond Highway, you know, we just don't accept it, that argument. And that's why I had to say something when you mentioned that, because all that you were saying about Huntington Avenue, we could cheer. That sounds right. It's an urban street. It's not in the middle of Virginia somewhere.
Okay.
And Tom has heard this repeatedly.
Yeah, we went through this. We went through this with North Gateway.
Yes.
Okay.
We keep hearing it, but sometimes nobody listens to us.
Okay. Well, I'll make a note of it, so I'll be part of that crowd with Tom Burke.
I'd put it in bold, please.
The which part?
Because we do say
for the
it often,
Richmond Highway.
so please put it in bold.
And if I were you, I wouldn't mention it, because you'll get things thrown at you from this crowd.
Well, in a way, I'm glad we're still virtual, because you guys can't throw tomatoes at me.
Just look closely at Tom's face. He's got scars all over it from this argument.
Okay.
Well, you know, the fact that it is a national highway system, unfortunately, is true. We're stuck with that. But the way to solve the problem of movement of pedestrians and traffic and emergency and whatever on Richmond Highway is not to continue to make it a car-centric road. It is a level of F, which came out of the studies that were done that Tom mentioned before for North Gateway, at Huntington Avenue, at Fort Hunt Road. It's all level F. So you're not even meeting the standards, but the standards to reduce the problems with the traffic is in our mind at the council, and that's all of our members, is to do road diet, do better signage, get the cops out there to get people to stop blocking the box. It isn't to widen the road. And oh, by the way, if you need to get people out in an emergency, we're going to have a 2-lane bus lane right down the center of that thing for 10 miles. That can be used. The buses don't have to run. You move tanks down it if you have to, depending on the situation. So please keep that in mind. Thank you.
Okay. All righty. I'm going to move on. Lynn, did you have another question, or is it from before? And you're on mute again, so.
I'm sorry, I just didn't take it down. You missed me laughing. I'm sorry.
Okay, that's all right. All right, so this slide here, this is all 24 intersections. So I want to just go over this, the graphic. With the analysis, there's only 5 intersections that are looking at, or that the applicant team or Kimberly Horn is looking at for mitigations. And I want to also caveat that we did include as part of background. So in the background as part of the analysis, that the mitigations that were proposed with, let's say, the North Gateway area here, so intersections 17, 18, and 22, what was proposed in that comp plan was for mitigations was included in this study. So with this use of, or the new uses proposed at Huntington Metro, 2 intersections, 17 and 22, the team has identified that they can go a little bit further with some mitigations as modifying signal timing, or doing enhancing the turning movements, and helping to get vehicle traffic through the intersections. Same thing with intersection 22 at Huntington Avenue and Fort Hunt Road. They're looking at signal timing, better eastbound, westbound travel movements for the vehicles. But that's including what was in the comp plan for the CBC, plus what this group is asking or is recommending as mitigations there. And then in the other area and around the PennDOT area, the BRT improvements along Richmond Highway, this was just announced by the BRT project team, that they're looking to modify the intersections of Shields Avenue at Richmond Highway, North Kings Highway, and School Street, and then closing off intersection 21, which is at the X of North Kings Highway, South Kings Highway. So those proposed modifications were given to the analysis team from Kimberly Horn early on, so they could accommodate that in their mitigations. And it's what's happening there is that it's working. So the signals, the proposed signals that are there when the BRT project comes in and does the improvements there, there's nothing additional needed for those 4 intersections. As a whole, out of the 24 intersections, most of these are operating at better than LOSD. So there's not a lot of areas where additional mitigation is needed. So on the 2 that are up here on the northwest side at Huntington at Telegraph and North Kings Highway at Telegraph, all they're looking at doing is proposing modifying signal time. So they're adding green time to the green time to the signal, so more vehicles can get through the intersection to clear it. And they're looking at doing that in the north-south direction, also modifying it in the east-west or along Telegraph Road and Telegraph Road, but also North Kings Highway, and then also Huntington. But what it doesn't do, and it doesn't impact the pedestrian crossing. So we did ask them, make sure that you're not impacting any pedestrian crossings when you adjust the signal time for green time. So it applies to these 2 here in the northwest, but it also applies to the ones at 17 and 22. And then the last one down here, Richmond Highway at Quander Road. They're just looking at lengthening one of the left turn lanes here, so it gives a little bit more storage for vehicles to get through the intersection. That's all it is for mitigation. So with the proposed uses, the trips that we talked about before, there really isn't that much mitigation that's being proposed in this area. And most of the other intersections are working at LOSD or better. So, which was surprising to see that given the number of intersections that we had them study. I have Gretchen. Do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, two actually.
Go ahead.
What is LOSD?
Oh, LOS, level of service D. So the D is, I hate to say it, like a grading score or whatever, but LOS, level of service, is the amount of delay at an intersection. So the D level, I believe, is 55 to 80 seconds.
No,
Okay.
No,
under
Oh.
55.
Under 55. Okay, thanks. That's why Tom
And
Burke
I'm
is
gonna
here. He has the
comment on
numbers.
number 17.
Yes, sir.
I
Yes,
got
ma'am.
stuck there the other day for 3 lights because everyone kept blocking the box. It was consistent.
Right. Yeah. So.
So that absolutely has to have some kind of mitigation.
Has to happen. Right. So, if you recall, and Tom Burke is here, but in their proposed mitigations for the North Gateway CBC, they're looking at modifying the left turn lanes from Huntington Avenue at Richmond Highway here, and then also at intersection 18 at Fort Hunt Road and Richmond Highway, to not have the left turn lanes at this intersection, but move them down to intersection 17. So it's a delay on the left turns, and you're looking at dual left turns at intersection 17. And Tom, if you'd like to add something.
Left from where? Left from Huntington onto Route 1 or left from Route 1 onto Huntington?
From Route 1 onto Huntington.
And then
yeah, I don't care. It's Huntington onto Route 1 that's the problem.
Okay.
Go ahead, Tom.
Huntington to go to Route 1 north is where you get everyone blocking the box.
We can take note of that.
Yeah, it's not fun. I'm just saying.
Not fun. Okay. Lynn?
Yeah,
Thanks,
just
Gretchen, by the way.
The same kind of thing. The Quanda Road intersection, and I'm just taking advantage of you guys and Tom being here. That is very dangerous for the cross and left turn on there. And, you know, I come through that intersection a lot, and you can't see the cars on the other side, and you can't see whether they're turning left or going straight. And I've seen several people come very close to an accident. So I hope you guys would look at that and see about marking it in some way to make it a little bit safer. It's a really dangerous spot. Thank you.
Okay. Oh, thanks for that. I appreciate that. And we are taking notes of that. Alexis Glenn.
Hey, good evening. My question is about the signal modifications. Is rest and walk and leading pedestrian intervals being considered as you're modifying these signals?
Yeah, so if there's a pedestrian at the intersection and they press the box or press the button for the pedestrian access to cross the road, they are still given priority on that. That works into the programming of the signal. What they're looking at doing with this one here is looking at giving green time for vehicles, but then not precluding pedestrian access. So pedestrian will still have the right.
They'll still have to press
the button. Still have to press the button, right? It's still active that way.
That's not really rest and walk, at least on the primary routes. They still have to
they have to be
hit a
active
button.
in that. Right.
And there's a lot of situations where that causes confusion and conflicts between drivers and people walking or on bikes. It's difficult if you're on a bike to get to a pedestrian signal often.
Right.
And if you forget to or can't get to a pedestrian button or don't get there right in time, it causes confusion between who has the right of way between drivers and people walking, and seeing that walk signal that's red versus the traffic signal that's green. So I just think that it would be a huge improvement to many of these intersections if we can consider doing some of that rest and walk.
Yeah, and that's a good point to make. So we can add that to Tim's part of the process, our project as well, for the ped and bike. So when they change the signals or something, we can have that side of the project look at the rest and activate ped signals.
Rest and walk.
Rest and
Not
walk.
re-
Sorry.
Rest
not
in
rest and
walk.
walk.
In
Rest-
walk, yeah. And for
rest-
folks who don't know what that means, for like, let's say Richmond Highway, where the green light on Richmond Highway is a minute and a half long, and it only takes an average of 30 seconds for people to cross. It means that ped signal will switch to green automatically without a button press until, the signal is automatically counting down to the yellow and the red, and then the ped signal follows suit with the traffic signal. There's not a pedestrian button press required.
Okay. We got that noted. So thank you for that. Mary?
Yeah, am I on mute? Am I off mute?
We can hear you. We can hear
Okay.
you.
Yeah, I'd be very happy to see that 12 and 13 move traffic more quickly from people turning right from North Kings or Huntington to get on the Beltway. That Huntington Road gets and North Kings really gets backed up around rush hour. I mean, I've sat there for like half hour or so waiting to make a right turn, and it'd be great if that could move more quickly onto the Beltway.
Okay.
Unfortunately, it's traffic going to Maryland that we don't have too much control over that's kind of causing that backup, but we are going to try to do what we can to address that issue.
Yep.
Well, wherever it's going, it needs to go faster.
Okay.
Well, there is a Southside Express Lane study coming up, the Southside Beltway Express, whatever VDOT's calling it, where they're looking at the express lanes potentially from Springfield to the Woodrow Wilson Bridge. We're hoping that VDOT can take a look at the Richmond Highway interchange and maybe consider some of these enhancements, because we're going to make sure they know that congestion is a major issue.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you for mentioning that, Tom, and we're probably getting massively off track here. However, the only thing VDOT understands is let's make everything wider. Let's pour more concrete. So my question to you is, we just got rid of, thanks to the good work of your office and others, that flyover that was going to go from Fort Hunt Road over to, the at-grade flyover at North Gateway, because it was incompatible with a neighborhood. You've already got in North Gateway at the Beltway side at least 3, what do you call them, clover leaves. Where do they intend to put this? What are they thinking to do that?
Are you talking about the express lanes?
Yes. How are they what's their thought? I'm sure you've been chatting with them, and it's driving us crazy trying to figure out what on earth they have in mind.
They would have to squeeze it in. I mean, that's the purpose of the study, I think, to determine whether it's feasible.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
So Mary, you had the question up from before your hand up. So unless there's something new, right?
Yeah. Lower.
No. Okay. Thank you.
And hey, Bob, I just want to do a quick time check with everybody. I think we billed this for to go to 8:30, and so I want to make sure that we can try to stick to that as much as we can. I know we got a little bit more material to go on in terms of the parking study as well, but I don't want to shortchange folks if they feel like they can stay a little bit longer as well.
Yeah, unfortunately, I have to check out by 8:30. I'm sorry.
Okay.
5 o'clock comes too early. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I will try to go through as much as I can in the time that you're still here, and others. So key takeaways from the transportation analysis, we did talk about what that was, basically of saying 5 intersections include mitigations, most are at acceptable levels. I just talked about that. So and the proposed comprehensive plan, the big takeaway at the number 1 is it does not result in significant additional delays at other study intersections. So we'll be looking at TDM management techniques for recommendations in the comp plan, and we're looking at specific mitigations at those key intersections. We talked about that. Moving on. Questions, you guys had questions as throughout. I'm going to move forward. So the next study was a park and ride demand study. And this takes into account the 3 parking garages that are on site. And so some you probably have seen or that the south garage was closed in 2018. And the study, the parking ride demand study, is looking at on the transit side itself, the 2 garages that are remaining, can they viably maintain a supply that will feed into the transit station use itself for buses and the rail system? And then also when the new uses come online as proposed with this plan amendment. And they also want to know is like, do they need to replace the south garage? So in their study, and I'll go through that, they looked at the parking ride demand analysis. So they looked at all these dots are places that have registered addresses that go into or that use the Huntington Metro Station. The ones in the yellow area are basically in the Huntington core. So this window, this box is 5 by 7.5 miles, is their park shed. So all of the users here use the Metro Station at Huntington Metro. The ones in blue are more or less to the Franconia Springfield, and the reds are scattered for Alexandria and in Maryland, but they do access the Metro Station site. So what they're looking to do, what they did with the study was, does the south garage that's closed does need replacement? The study says, and they indicated with their analysis that it does not need to be replaced with a new garage. They're going to demolish it with the land uses that are proposed on the south side. The middle and north garages will remain, and the park shed, well, accounting for the households and transit riders. So this number down here in the 2018, 1,997, that's the average annual peak hour riders that were accessing the Huntington Metro Station in 2018. 2018, caveat the year is that that was the last full year of service at the station. 2019, there was a 2-month closure for construction on the rail in the summer, and then 2020, 2021, we had a pandemic, so ridership was down. So the last full year we had them study was 2018, that had the continuous ridership demand at the garages. So they also looked at forecasting how far into the future will something happen, or where demand for the 2 garages equal 2,732 spaces, and combined. So they're looking at MWCOG, which is the regional model, which looks at everything in the region growing to a certain level. They started out base year of 2020 or 2018, and they projected out how far along the lines if that model will continue to like 2030, 35, 40, 45 and such. So the land use plans are every land use plan, including the Embark project and others development projects in that box, the 5 by 7.5 mile box. And then the current census as it projects out what that might do for parking demand. The red line here is when WMATA anticipates that the north garage reaches its end of life, and the north garage was built in. Sorry, I got to backtrack. One slide. North garage was built in 1990. The middle garage 2008. So what they're looking at doing in the analysis, that 2035 year is when they think that the north garage might need to be replaced. But at that time, those 3 trend lines show that the parking demand will be met up to that level. It's the MWCOG level that the line at around 2040 might be projecting that there's going to be more of a demand for spaces that doesn't have the capacity of 2732. But the red line will say that, hey, we might need to replace that garage. So one of the recommendations as I was doing the analysis is that there's going to be a couple of things or a few things that are going to be happening in the next 10 years time that might affect what happens with this garage. And so what I was what my recommendations are for the for WMATA is, well, prepare a letter looking at the acceptance of that analysis, but before the or when the BRT is operational around 2030 and before the garage is replaced or end of life comes up in 2035, that another parking demand study take place. So sometime in the future, maybe 10 years time, that they take another look at the parking on the site, the 2,732 spaces, the development that's being proposed, if that's coming online with along the north side of the station at Huntington Avenue, and then also with all the other development happening in the area, do another study. That way we'll know, is the garage, the north garage, does it have to be replaced with a one-to-one replacement, one space per one space, or the 1,458 spaces, does it have to be replaced with something exactly what it was before, or can it be less? So, but we don't have enough predictions or predictability at this point to tell, because the BRT is not operational and the end of life is not close yet. So, so these are things that this is a demand analysis that's going to happen again about 10 years from now, and with all those things that come up. So we need to look at it that way. It'll probably be the redo of the analysis that Stephen just chimed in. It'll probably be before the end of life for the garage for the north side. So before it needs to be replaced, the analysis will take place. Any questions on that one? Mary, go ahead.
Yeah, how long does it take to replace the garage, and where will people park while that's happening?
Stephen, are you online? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, it does take time to replace the garage. It can take between 1 and 2 years from groundbreaking. And we would probably think about strategies to phase the closure of the garage and reconstruction in order to minimize the impact to customers. We have also, for other parts of garage shutdowns in the region for various reasons, have adjusted our pricing strategies in order to accommodate customers that may have been impacted. But we do as much as we can to minimize that impact. One of the other strategies would be to be thinking about replacing the garage with enough anticipation so that we weren't in a super crunch for parking spaces, but doing it when more in the middle term of that, like in the earlier of the 2030s, whereas in the 2040 beyond is where we'll start getting to that pinch point. And the garage is reaching its end of lifespan anyway, so we're expecting that we'll need to.
I would recommend definitely looking at that sooner rather than later and doing a phased approach. We had our rec center was going to do a phased approach, but they got jammed up and now they have to close it for 2 years, which is making a lot of people unhappy. So yeah, the people will be parking all over the neighborhoods and being crazy. So you really should consider that sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
Okay.
I agree with Mary.
And the great thing I think about doing actually this process that we're going through right now has been making the need for this type of strategy more evident, rather than at some stations where it sort of creeps up on us faster than, and we weren't paying attention enough to it.
Yep. Okay. Alexis, you have a question.
Yes. Is the possibility of housing or other types of retail or other space being considered when this north garage reaches the end of life, that could be considered? You know, could it be a parking garage with housing or other amenities included with it?
Right. Yeah. The applicant, WMATA and Stout and Teague, we're looking at residential on the north side here. It was a concept plan that's way far back in my presentation, but they were looking at, oh, you're asking if the transit garage can be wrapped with residential in that respect, or not a standalone garage.
As we're, we're obviously way ahead of,
Right.
what could potentially happen with the site. So if, as we're considering planning, is the consideration of other types of uses of space along with a garage, part
Yeah,
of
no,
the consideration.
absolutely. I can add on to that. So there's sort of two objectives that we have is when the north garage is reconstructed, we want to reconstruct it as a more integrated garage with the middle garage, as well as with the station, because that also provides some sharing benefits and improved access, particularly for ADA customers. Oh, 1 second. My little boy is coming in to tell me that I should come inside. 1 second. Okay, I'm back. The other thing that we are looking at is with the development on the north side, we do want to explore the opportunities for sharing spaces with residential and retail and other uses within our commuter garage. So again, we can minimize the space. Oh, hold on, buddy, I'm on the phone. And that's something that we're looking to initially experiment as part of our West Falls Church project that's also in Fairfax County. And we're coming up with a different fare payment system that allows a more variety of users of the garage. So we definitely look forward to experimenting and going in that direction.
Okay. All right, I'm going to move on. Thanks for the questions, appreciate that. And we are taking notes as you were asking them. So last one was the questions. I'm going to go on to the next slide. So, and Graham, you could probably help me out with this one, but want to talk about where the plan text is on the top half. And this is a question that came up before. But then also on the bottom half, we're looking at finalizing the transportation analysis. So we're in May, as you know. We're finalizing comments from v.fcdot. We already sent that out to Kimley Horn, and we're looking for them to do a resubmittal of their TIA so we can take a look at it, review it again, and then have our final review done by June. And then hopefully by July, we'll have the VDOT and FCDOT acceptance of the traffic study. And then Graham, if you want to talk about the top half of this chart,
I'll be very brief here because I know we're a little bit over time. But I wanted to also just talk about kind of the next steps in terms of the task force. So as Bob has, on this slide here with the star, the yellow star, this is a task force presentation, obviously on, the transportation impacts, which you've just heard, across modes. And so this is kind of the final kind of topical meeting that we have where we're discussing, land use, environmental policy, transportation. We've kind of done that that series of topical meetings over the summer, fall, winter, now into the spring. And so now is the time to kind of put it all together on paper and start seeing, what is the task force's interest in looking at potential plan text. And so I have here 2 dates in mind, and we'll send out some invites most likely tomorrow so you have them on your calendar. But we are looking at 2 meetings in June where we'll be discussing what we call the straw man. And so the straw man is, we call it a straw man, but it's just draft plan text. I call it a straw man so that people feel as though they can attack it. And so it's kind of a way in which we try to iteratively reach consensus with the task force. Staff typically kind of takes the initial draft based on the comments that we've received from the task force, as well as synthesizing the comments that we receive from agencies and applying those to potential plan text. And so we take a kind of a first cut at it. We'll introduce it on the 7th of June to the task force, and aren't asking for an adoption or a recommendation at that stage. This is really kind of a time to look at it, compare it to what you've heard over the course of the meetings that we've had with the task force. See if anything's missing or if you'd like things to be revised. And so we would then potentially bring it back on the 21st of June, hopefully with additional changes in response to the task force's comments. And so we'll, as I mentioned, this is intended to be an exercise by which we can reach consensus between staff and the task force. Y'all saw this process kind of play out with the Parker, as well as the Hopkins Lane nomination earlier on in the plan amendment process for SSPA. So we'll do something similar. I think that this is a larger study with kind of more with potentially with greater impacts just due to the size. So there's additional kind of considerations that we have for this given kind of the phasing of development as well as some of the policy priorities that we have for TOD areas. So we anticipate that the text will be a bit longer than we saw with the Parker as well as with Hopkins Lane. But what we'll do is try to present you with something that we think is kind of the synthesis of the comments, bring it to you, incorporate any additional comments that we have from that meeting on the 7th, and bring it back for a vote potentially on the 21st. So we got a couple of questions here. Mary, I think I saw you first.
Yeah, when would we get the straw man one text to look over?
Yeah, so 6-7. So I think typically what we would try to do is do it the week in advance. So at some point during the week of the 30th, we try to get it out as early as we can. We'll certainly strive for about a week in advance if we can, but certainly no later than the Friday in advance. And Ellen?
Well, that was my question too, because I'm unavailable on the 7th. So, and I wanted to be able to see it so I can then send some questions in and be able to, have a vote on the 21st. All right, as long as we get it, that's cool.
Yep, absolutely. We'll certainly send it in advance, and it'll certainly be that week. I just don't know the exact date yet, so it's just going to be once we've had the final round of staff comments on it, and we're able to release it to you. But we'll do it as soon as we possibly can, during that week in advance.
Okay, I don't see any more questions, Graham. So my last slide is basically questions again, but that's it for the presentation for transportation. So appreciate everyone's questions and comments, both for mine and as well as Tim's. We did take a lot of good notes today, and we'll have this recording so we can actually go back and make sure we capture the ones that we might have missed by not writing them down. So appreciate that and your patience in going through this as quickly as we could in the 2 hours or so that we had. So and that's it from myself. So Walter or
Bob.
Good, great. Thank you. That was really an excellent back and forth. I do appreciate it very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, guys. Good work.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was awesome. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Tim and Tom Bashotny. Thank you very much for being on the call. Very helpful. I believe we had some public participation and comments along the way, and that was very helpful. And thank you. And if there are no other questions or conversations,
I see a question.
What a question.
Sonia?
Folks, yeah, sorry. I was waiting for the end when the community was supposed to give a time to ask some questions. So I guess I should have done it in during the presentations, but.
No, thank you for your diligence there. Please go ahead.
Sorry, I know we're going long, but what I wanted to ask really quick was the active transportation study made great recommendations. Huntington Ave, North Kings Highway, but didn't do anything for Richmond Highway. We know this road is dangerously wide, has narrow sidewalks and limited crossing options. And at the same time, we're seeing the transportation analysis is looking at mitigating vehicle travel along Route 1 in that section. So I guess my question is, or maybe it's just sort of my comment, I'm really concerned about people walking and biking to the redeveloped station area from that side of Richmond Highway. So how are you assessing their needs and what can be done to make it safer for them? Maybe you can't answer that now, but I hope that you will seriously consider that as part of this effort.
Sure, so I can address that. Again, we did have a fairly limited scope for the active transportation study. You're right, there are certainly concerns that need to be addressed on Richmond Highway. And I think as part of the active Fairfax plan, the countywide plan, they are doing some more targeted outreach for specific areas around the county, and perhaps that could also be incorporated within that study as well.
But it's not being incorporated as part of this redevelopment effort at the transit station area.
No, it is a bit outside the scope of what we agreed to do for the active transportation study. But that doesn't mean it can't be studied as part of another effort.
Okay, thanks.
All right, anyone else? Commissioner Tim Sargent, anything for the good of the group?
I think the group's done pretty darn well without me. I've been listening and learning, so I think we're good.
Yeah, I'll just say the next time we have this at Lynn's house and we can all enjoy cookies while we meet.
We'll certainly give you the cookies and a little something to go with it if you want. Please.
So moved.
All right, so please take note of the dates and times of future meetings at the bottom of the agenda. And we will be back at this again June 7th, I believe is what we have, right, Graham? June 7th, 11th meeting regarding the Huntington Metro Station. So if there's nothing further, I like to say good night to everyone and look forward to seeing you in the near future.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Good to see you.
Take care. Good night.
Good night,
Bye,
everyone.
guys. Good night.
Mark, are you going to stay on a minute?
Sure.
Or you want to call or what?
I'll get you. I'll email you and we'll chat.
Okay, great.
Or
Okay.
you have my cell, call me.
Yeah, okay.